Story 1. The Haunted Warehouse. It was a cold, moonless night when I started my shift at the old, decrepit warehouse on the outskirts of town. My job was simple. Keep an eye on things, make sure no one broke in, and report any suspicious activity. I had taken the night shift because it paid a lot better and my bills were piling up. I needed every extra dollar I could get. The warehouse had a reputation. They said it was haunted. Of course, I didn't believe in ghosts, but the place had an eerie feel to it. The floors creaked, the shadows seemed to move, and the wind howled through the broken windows, making an almost human wail. I tried to shrug it off, chalking it up to old building noises and my overactive imagination. Around midnight, the temperature dropped suddenly. I could see my breath in the air, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. I did my usual rounds, flashlight in hand, checking every corner of the building. Everything seemed normal until I reached the far end of the warehouse. There was a door there, one I hadn't noticed before. It was slightly ajar, and the cold draft blew from the gap. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to take a look. The room beyond was dark, the only light coming from my flashlight. As I stepped in, I noticed old, dusty furniture covered in white sheets. It looked like a storage room for long-forgotten things. As I walked further in, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, and rushed to open it. It wouldn't budge. I was trapped. Panic set in, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had my phone. I could call for help. But when I pulled it out, there was no signal. Of course, there wasn't. This place was a dead zone for cell reception. I took a deep breath and continued to explore the room, hoping to find another way out. That's when I heard it, a soft whisper. I turned around, shining my flashlight in all directions, but there was nobody there. The whispering grew louder, and I could almost make out the words. It sounded like a child's voice pleading for help. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The whispering stopped abruptly, and the room fell silent. I stood there, my flashlight shaking in my hand, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Then, I saw it. A faint, glowing figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a little girl, her eyes wide open with fear, her mouth moving as if she was trying to speak. I backed away, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. Ghosts weren't real. But there she was, as clear as day, staring at me with those sad, pleading eyes. "Help me," she whispered. I wanted to run, to get as far away from this place as I possibly could, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, frozen with fear. The little girl stepped closer, her form becoming more solid with each step. I could see the details now, her tattered dress, her tangled hair, the dirt smudged on her face. "She was my favorite," she said softly, pointing to an old wooden chest in the corner of the room. I hadn't noticed it before. I walked over, my hands trembling as I lifted the lid. Inside was a small, worn-out doll, its button eyes missing, its dress torn. I picked it up, and the room grew colder. The little girl was right beside me now, her eyes fixed on the doll. "They took her from me," she said. "The bad men. They took her and they took me." A chill ran down my spine as the realization hit me. This wasn't just a ghost story. Something terrible had happened here, and this little girl was a victim. I felt a surge of anger and sadness. "She deserves peace," I said aloud. "I'll help you. I'll make sure they pay for what they did." She smiled, a faint, sad smile, and then she was gone. The room seemed to lighten up, and the door creaked open. I stepped out, clutching the doll, determined to find out the truth. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. As soon as the sun rose, I went to the police and told them everything. They investigated the warehouse and found evidence of a crime that had been covered up for decades. The little girl and many others had been victims of a cruel gang. It took time, but justice was served. The warehouse was torn down, replaced by a memorial for the victims. I still think about that night, about that little girl and her doll. I like to believe she's at peace now, and maybe, Just maybe, I helped make that happen. Story 2. The Abandoned Hospital. Working security at the old hospital was supposed to be an easy gig. The place had been closed for years, but the city hired me to keep an eye on it, preventing vandals and squatters. It was just me, a flashlight, and a series of dimly lit corridors and rooms. The pay was good, and I figured it would be quite an easy job. But I was wrong. It was my third night when things started to get strange. The building was silent, except for the occasional creak of an old pipe. Around midnight, I was making my rounds when I heard a faint noise coming from the basement. It sounded like a whisper, barely audible. I stopped and listened, but it went quiet. I convinced myself it was just the wind. An hour later, I heard it again, louder this time. It was a distinct whisper, like somebody was just around the corner. My curiosity got the better of me, and I headed towards the basement. The air grew colder as I descended the stairs. The whispering continued, growing clearer but still unintelligible. In the basement, the sound led me to an old storage room. The door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open, my flashlight sweeping the room. It was empty except for a few rusty gears and broken equipment. As I turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my flashlight flickering. Panic set in as I pounded the door, yelling for help. But my voice echoed back at me. The whispering started again, closer now, like it was right next to my ear. I swung the flashlight wildly, but there was no one there. The light flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, using its weak light to find the door handle. As I pulled it open, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck and heard a voice say, "Stay with me." I bolted up the stairs, not looking back until I reached the main floor. My heart was racing, and I was drenched in sweat. I locked myself in the security office and called my supervisor. He arrived with another guard, and we searched the basement together. Nothing was out of place, and the door to the storage room was open, just as I had left it. My supervisor chalked it up to my imagination and stress, but I knew what I had heard. The next night, I called in sick and started looking for a new job. I couldn't go back to that hospital, not after what happened. I could still hear the whispers sometimes in the dead of night, and I wondered if whatever was in the basement was still waiting for me, hoping I'll return. Story 3. The Haunted Gas Station. I took the graveyard shift at the gas station out of desperation. Bills were piling up, and I needed the money. It was a quiet job, mostly. Hardly anyone came in after midnight. It was just me, the dim lights, and the hum of the coolers. It seemed easy enough, but things changed after a few weeks. One night, around 2 a.m., a thick fog rolled in. It was unusual for this time of year, but I shrugged it off. I was restocking the shelves when I heard the chime of the door. I looked up, but no one was there. Odd, but maybe it was just the wind. I went back to my task, but then I heard it again. The door chimed, but the store was empty. My heart started to race. I stepped outside to see if anyone was messing with me, but the parking lot was empty. The fog had swallowed everything, making it hard to see past the gas pumps. Back inside, I tried to shake off the unease. I sat behind the counter and checked the security cameras. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I saw movement in the aisle near the back. It looked like a shadow, just a quick flicker. I leaned closer to the screen, straining to see. There it was again, a dark shape darting between the shelves. I grabbed the flashlight and walked to the back of the store, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice echoed in the silence. As I turned the corner, my flashlight flickered and went out. Panic set in as I fumbled with the switch, but it wouldn't turn back on. I was in the dark, alone with whatever was in the store. Suddenly, I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, getting closer. I backed up, my heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps stopped, and I could feel a presence near me, watching. I bolted back to the front, nearly tripping over my own feet. I slammed the door to the office and locked it, grabbing my phone to call the police. While I waited, I watched the cameras. The shadow was gone, but I could see faint handprints on the glass of the front door, as if somebody had been pressing their hands against it. The police arrived, and I explained what happened. They searched the store and the area around but found nothing. They said it was probably just my mind playing tricks on me. I quit the next day. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in that store, something that watched me from the shadows. I still get chills when I think about it. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the chime of the gas station door in my dreams. I wake up drenched in sweat, wondering if whatever it was in that store followed me home. Story 4. The Whispering Warehouse. I always dreaded the night shifts. The warehouse was huge, filled with towering shelves stacked with boxes. When the lights dimmed, shadows seemed to stretch and twist in unsettling ways. It was my job to do inventory, making sure everything was where it was supposed to be. It was usually quiet, almost too quiet, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of the building settling. One night, I was going through my usual routine when I heard a faint noise, like a whisper. I paused, holding my breath, trying to pinpoint exactly where it was coming from, but it was gone as quickly as it came. I shook it off, blaming it on my tired mind, and continued counting boxes. An hour later, I heard it again, this time louder and clearer. It was definitely a whisper, but I couldn't make out the words. My heart pounded as I slowly made my way down the aisles. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, but all I saw were more boxes and more shadows. As I turned a corner, I saw a figure at the far end of the aisle. It was dark, just a silhouette, but it was clearly a person. My flashlight flickered, and when the light stabilized, the figure was gone. I hurried down the aisle, but there was no one there, only the lingering sense that I wasn't alone. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the whispering continued, more frequent and insistent. I decided to check the security cameras. Maybe they would show something, anything to try and explain what I had experienced. In the security room, I rewound the footage and watched it in growing horror. There was nothing unusual. It was just me, walking down the aisles, flashlight in hand. No figure, no whispering, nothing. It was just me, looking paranoid and jumpy. Suddenly, the screen flickered and went black. When it came back on, there was a message written in a shaky, almost childlike scroll: "Get out." My blood ran cold. I didn't wait to see if it was a prank or something more sinister. I grabbed my things and left the warehouse as soon as I could. The next morning, I reported what happened to my supervisor. He laughed it off, saying the old building had a history of strange noises and power surges. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me that night, something that wanted me gone. I never worked a night shift again, and I couldn't help but feel relieved every time I saw the warehouse in my rearview mirror, getting smaller and smaller as I drove away. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and check out my other horror stories on screen now. Until next time, sleep tight.